The morning light spread slowly across the blue sky of Alaris 9, a peaceful human colony far from Earth. The streets were filled with quiet sounds of life, children laughing, traders opening their shops, and soldiers walking their usual patrol routes without worry. It had been decades since the last war, and most people believed peace was no longer fragile. The colony had grown into a small world of hope, where families dreamed of one day returning to Earth to show their children where humanity began. The colony governor sat in his office, looking at a message from his wife on Earth, smiling faintly as he typed a reply. For him, it was just another calm day under a bright sun. But peace often dies quietly before the storm arrives. Far beyond the colony's orbit, in the cold, dark space, something stirred. Radar stations picked up strange signals, faint distortions, unknown energy readings, but the local defense unit assumed it was another passing storm of magnetic dust. The officer on duty even joked, "The machines are more nervous than us." No one knew that those small flickers on the screen were the first signs of death approaching. Then, without warning, the sky changed. The blue hue of the atmosphere twisted into red. The children stopped playing. The air trembled with deep vibrations, like thunder coming from the heavens. One of the soldiers looked up, confused, and froze. Out of the clouds, massive dark shapes appeared, ships so large they covered the sun. Alien warships. Dozens of them. Their hulls glowed with strange runes, and their engines screamed as they descended like falling meteors. The colony's defense system activated, alarms howled across the city, and panic broke loose. Civilians ran for shelters, parents held their children, and soldiers rushed to the defense towers shouting orders. But it was already too late. The first blast came from orbit, a burning beam that tore through the Capitol dome, melting towers into rivers of fire. The sky itself seemed to cry as explosions spread from one city to another. Entire streets vanished, buildings shattered, and screams filled the comm channels. Command to all units. We're under attack. Repeat, we're under. The message cut off mid-sentence. Fire swallowed the signal. The governor tried to send a distress call to Earth, his hands shaking as he spoke into the transmitter, but all he heard was static. One by one, the colony's satellites went dark. The alien fleet didn't communicate. They didn't demand surrender. They simply destroyed. Civilians hiding underground could feel the tremors shaking the Earth. The walls cracked, dust filled the air, and people whispered prayers to gods they had forgotten. Mothers cried silently, holding their children tight as the sound of collapsing metal grew louder above them. In the last remaining defense tower, 3 soldiers worked desperately to keep the signal alive. "We need to reach Earth," one shouted. "If they hear us, they'll send help." Another, a young operator barely 20, adjusted the antenna manually while the tower shook from the bombardment. Flames climbed up the walls, and smoke filled the room, but he kept transmitting. "This is Alaris 9, emergency signal, alien fleet, massive loss. Repeat." A blast tore through the upper section, throwing him across the floor. With blood on his face, he crawled back to the console, his trembling hand pressing the button again. "They're coming," he whispered into the MIC, his voice barely steady. "We're burning. Tell Earth." That was the last transmission from Alaris 9. The screen on the Earth listening station flickered, showing broken static. The operator leaned closer, frowning. He replayed the audio. Static again, then faint words, "They're coming, tell Earth." His eyes widened. He tried to connect, but the signal was gone. He turned to his superior, voice shaking, "Sir, Alaris 9 just went silent." The room fell still. Technicians froze in their seats. Someone muttered, "That's not possible." They had full defense. The superior officer didn't respond. He just stared at the empty feed, watching the faint echo of a burning world light up on the radar, then disappear completely. Somewhere, on the edge of the galaxy, a new sun burned briefly and then died. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. On Earth, people continued their daily lives, unaware that one of their brightest colonies had just been turned to ash. But in the command room, the truth began to settle like dust after an explosion. A young woman at the console whispered, Who could do something like this? No one answered her. The only sound left was the faint hum of the machines, recording what little was left of Alaris 9. In that quiet, something changed in the air, a cold, invisible weight that carried anger, grief, and disbelief. The humans didn't yet know the faces of those who attacked them. They didn't know the reason or the plan. But deep inside, a storm was beginning to form. A storm that would soon reach across the stars. The operator removed his headset slowly, staring at the blank screen as if hoping the colony would speak again. But there was only silence, endless and empty. He whispered to himself, "They are gone." Then he looked out the window toward the night sky, where a faint red glow flickered far beyond the stars, and he muttered softly, "Earth will know." In the darkened halls of United Global Command, the air was thick with silence and grief. Every screen in the war room showed the same thing, static where Alaris 9's signal once glowed bright. The officers who had worked with the colony for years sat frozen in disbelief, some with their hands covering their mouths, others simply staring at the empty feed. The commander in charge, Admiral Rains, stood near the main display, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. On the large holomap, the location of Alaris 9 blinked once, then vanished, replaced by a small red X that marked its destruction. "Confirm it," Rains said quietly. His voice was low but heavy. A technician swallowed hard and replied, "Sir, all contact lost. No survivors detected. Long-range scanners show nothing. The planet's atmosphere is gone." The words hit like a hammer. Around the room, officers lowered their heads, and the faint hum of machines filled the silence. One young analyst whispered, "It can't be. That was 200,000 people." Another muttered, "Families, schools, soldiers, all gone." But no one could find the right words to describe the horror. The feed from the deep space recorder began to play the last signal again. "They are coming. We're burning. Tell Earth." The operator who received it sat in the corner, staring at his trembling hands. He hadn't stopped hearing that voice since it came through the speakers. He could still feel the fear in it, the panic of a man watching his world die. As the recording played, Admiral Rains turned away, hiding the emotion in his face. He looked out the massive window, where Earth hung peacefully in orbit below the station. Blue, calm, alive. So unaware. "Find out who did this," he ordered finally. "I want every probe, every satellite, every ship looking for answers." Scientists and intelligence officers scrambled to follow the command, fingers flying across their consoles. Within minutes, they began pulling data from the colony's last transmissions, scanning radiation signatures, and comparing the patterns to known alien species. The room buzzed with tension until one analyst stopped typing and stared at her screen in shock. "Sir, we have a match," she said softly. The energy readings matched the Threx Dominion. Murmurs spread like wildfire through the room. Everyone knew that name. The Threx were a proud and violent race who ruled several star systems. They were known for their arrogance, for calling humans soft-fleshed dreamers. But they had never attacked openly, not like this. "The Threx?" Rains asked, turning sharply. "They're on the council. Why would they break treaty law?" The analyst hesitated. "They sent a message, sir." A holofeed flickered to life. The alien leader appeared, tall, scaled, with golden eyes and a cruel smile. His voice echoed coldly through the room. "Humans built their colony too close to our territory. This is our warning. Stay out of Threx space, or share their fate." The transmission ended with static. For a moment, no one moved. Then a low, angry whisper spread across the room. "They called it a warning," one officer said bitterly. "They erased a planet." Rains slammed his fist against the console, cracking the surface. "A warning," he growled. 200,000 civilians? That was no warning. That was murder. The emotion that had been trapped in silence broke loose. Some shouted in anger, others in grief. But through it all, Rains stood still, his hands clenched behind his back, his mind already racing ahead. He knew what this meant. It wasn't just an attack, it was a declaration. Humanity's era of peace was over. Across Earth, the news spread within hours. Every major network replayed the same burning images from the colony. Cities in flames, towers collapsing, voices screaming in static. The entire planet fell quiet. Schools stopped. Offices froze. Even in crowded cities, people stood still, staring at public screens showing the last moments of Alaris 9. For the first time in generations, humanity felt helpless again. Vigils began that night. Millions gathered in streets holding candles, crying for those who would never return. But under that grief, something else began to grow. Anger. Deep, steady, burning anger. In military bases around the world, soldiers requested to be reassigned to the fleet. Factories that had been silent since the peace treaty began to stir again. Engineers worked overnight, dusting off old blueprints for ships that were never supposed to fly again. At the United Command, Rains met with the World Council. Leaders from every nation appeared as holograms around the circular table, their faces grim. "We can't let this go unanswered," said the representative from the European Union. "If we do, it tells the galaxy humanity is weak." Another added, "They killed our people. We can't stay silent." A few still hesitated, afraid of another galactic war. "We don't know how powerful the threats are," one diplomat warned. "If we fight, we risk extinction." Rains looked around the room, his expression hard as steel. "They already killed our people," he said slowly. "Extinction began the moment we stayed quiet." His words echoed, and no one argued. The council fell silent, and after a long pause, they voted. One by one, the lights around the table turned red, signaling approval. Humanity would respond. Rains stood at the center of the room, voice calm but deadly as he spoke the words that would shape history. "Activate Operation Retribution." Across Earth, sirens that had not sounded in a century wailed again. In underground bases and deep-sea hangars, massive doors began to open. Submerged platforms rose through the ocean's surface, revealing dark, silent warships built during the last Great War and kept hidden for a day like this. The human fleet, long forgotten, began to awaken. Pilots suited up, engineers powered reactors, and entire cities watched as the first ship, Erebus 1, broke through the waves, water cascading off its hull like a rising monster. The stars above no longer looked peaceful. They looked like the next battlefield. On the main deck, Admiral Rains watched the ships prepare for launch. His second-in-command asked quietly, "What message should we send to the Threx?" Rains stared at the glowing horizon for a long moment, then said, "No message. They'll understand when the stars go dark." The fleet's engines roared to life, shaking the ocean itself. The war had just begun, and every human watching knew, Alaris 9 would be avenged. Beneath the vast Pacific Ocean, where sunlight never reached and pressure could crush steel, enormous metal doors began to open for the first time in a century. The hidden heart of Earth's defense, a place whispered about but never confirmed, came alive once again. Deep blue emergency lights illuminated the colossal tunnels as technicians ran along steel walkways, shouting orders over the sound of engines roaring to life. Inside the massive docking chambers, humanity's forgotten fleet, black ships the size of cities, slowly awakened from their long sleep. They had been built in secret after the last war, then sealed away in the hope that they would never be needed again. But today, hope had died with Alaris 9. Inside the central control room, Admiral Rains stood before a holographic projection of the entire fleet, his face lit by the blue glow of digital light. Each ship carried a name carved into its hull: Alaris, Vigilant, Remembrance, Echo, Honor, Oathkeeper. Every one of them bore the memory of those who had fallen. Around him, officers worked with silent precision, their expressions cold and focused. No one laughed, no one spoke casually. The loss of the colony had changed everything. Humanity's peace had turned into a quiet rage. Across Earth, factories that had been dormant for decades now burned with activity. Workers labored day and night, forging weapons, missiles, and armor plates. Families hung the flag of Alaris, 9 in their windows, and volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Every human heart beat with the same message: never again. In one of the fleet's docking bays, a group of young pilots walked toward their fighter ships, their helmets under their arms. Some tried to look brave, but fear flickered behind their eyes. One of them, a man barely 25, whispered, "Do you think we're ready for this?" His friend gave a tight smile. "Ready doesn't matter anymore. They burned our people. That's all I need to remember." They climbed into their cockpits, sealing themselves inside the humming machines that would soon scream through the stars. Technicians moved between rows of fighters, checking every circuit, every thruster. The hangar echoed with the sound of engines warming up and the faint hum of reactors charging. Far above, on the ocean's surface, massive tidal waves rose as the first of Earth's warships broke through. Steam and water exploded upward, and the black hull of Erebus 1 rose like a sleeping giant returning to the world. Its size dwarfed aircraft carriers, and its weapons glowed faintly along its sides. On every continent, people watched through live feeds as the ships emerged one by one, climbing toward the sky like dark angels. From the command deck, Admiral Rains gave the order: "Prepare for launch." His voice carried through every intercom, reaching the soldiers in orbit, the engineers underground, and the citizens watching from their homes. The sound of engines thundered across the oceans, shaking the Earth itself. A voice came through the speakers, all ships reporting ready status. "Awaiting your word, Admiral." Rains looked at the holographic map showing the stars, each glowing dot representing a system, each one a possible enemy. His eyes stopped on the location of the Threx Dominion. "Set coordinates," he said. "We're going hunting." Meanwhile, far beyond Earth's orbit, alien eyes were already watching. The Threx Dominion's outpost stationed near the human border detected unusual activity. Inside the alien command ship, the officers hissed and clicked in their native tongue, their golden eyes flickering with curiosity. "Humans mobilizing," one reported. "They awaken ships long hidden. Perhaps a show of emotion." Their commander laughed, a sound like metal scraping stone. "Let them gather. They are still children playing with fire." They didn't understand. Humanity was not showing emotion, they were showing purpose. Back on Earth, as the fleet assembled in orbit, an announcement played across the planet. A deep, steady voice echoed through every city. "To the people of Earth, today, we stand not for revenge, but for remembrance. Alaris 9 was more than a colony, it was home. And home deserves justice." The message repeated, stirring both tears and resolve. People filled streets and rooftops to watch the sky. Thousands of lights moved across the atmosphere, the fleet leaving orbit. Children waved, parents saluted, and old veterans whispered blessings. The ships disappeared into the blackness of space, leaving only trails of white fire behind. Inside the flagship, Erebus 1, Rains stood before his crew. "Our orders are simple," he said. "No negotiations, no warnings. The Threx destroyed 200,000 innocent lives. We will end their ability to ever do it again." Around him, his officers nodded, faces hard with determination. The youngest officer, Lieutenant Mara, asked quietly, "Sir, what if they surrender?" Rains turned to her, eyes cold as iron. "Then they'll surrender in the ruins of their own sky." The fleet jumped into hyperspace, and the stars stretched into endless white lines. In that silence, many of the soldiers closed their eyes. Some whispered the names of family members lost on Alaris 9. Others thought of what they were about to do: wipe out an entire enemy empire. None of them felt joy, only a heavy purpose. Humanity wasn't fighting for power or territory. They were fighting to make sure no one would ever erase another human world again. In the depths of the ship, engineers monitored the new weapon systems being armed for the first time. Among them was Project Dawnfire, a superweapon capable of burning entire fleets. It had been banned by the Galactic Council decades ago, but Earth no longer cared about Council rules. One of the engineers looked at the glowing core and said softly, "We swore never to use this." His supervisor replied, "We swore never to need it." Hours later, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the edge of Threx territory. Before them, a vast red star glowed, surrounded by stations, patrols, and civilian planets. The alien fleet was already moving, confident in their numbers. They didn't expect humans to come this far, or this prepared. On Erebus 1, Rain stood over the tactical display as red enemy icons filled the screen. "They are ready for us," his second-in-command said. "Good," Rains replied. "So are we." The order came like a storm breaking the night. "All units, prepare for engagement." Across the fleet, soldiers tightened their harnesses, pilots whispered prayers, and engineers powered reactors to full. The darkness outside came alive with motion. For a brief moment, everything was still, the calm before history changed forever. Rains looked out the window at the alien star, glowing faintly in the distance, and murmured under his breath, "For Alaris 9. The engines ignited. Humanity's fury moved as one. The first human warfleet in 100 years entered enemy space, silent, relentless, and unstoppable far beyond the edge of human territory. In the frozen void between stars, the fleet emerged from hyperspace. The black ships of Earth glided silently, their hulls absorbing the faint light of distant suns. Each vessel bore the mark of Alaris 9, a small white insignia etched on its side, a promise carved in metal. The space around them was quiet, almost peaceful, but everyone aboard knew that peace here was only a memory. Inside the flagship Erebus 1, Admiral Rains stood on the bridge, staring at the glowing star map hovering before him. Red dots filled the display, enemy patrols, defense stations, and fleets belonging to the Threx Dominion. The alien system they were approaching was heavily fortified, guarded by warships and orbital cannons. Rains studied it in silence, then turned to his crew. "They think distance will keep them safe," he said softly. "Let's prove them wrong." His voice was calm, but beneath it burned controlled fury, the kind that made even veterans stand straighter. In the dark below, the communications officer monitored long-range signals. "Sir," she said, "we've intercepted Threx chatter. They've detected us." Rains nodded slowly. "Then let them see." He gave a single order, "Transmit the message." Across the void, on every alien frequency, a simple signal began to play. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't words of peace. It was a recording of the last broadcast from Alaris 9. "They're coming. We're burning. Tell Earth." Then silence. The aliens listened, confused, then uneasy, and then terrified. Moments later, their senses flared. The humans were already here. The first human strike group descended on the Threx border outpost. The alien commander, a tall, scaled creature with burning gold eyes, barked orders to his crew. "Prepare defenses. Target their lead ship." But before his words finished, the sky above his planet exploded in light. Human ships appeared from hyperspace in perfect formation, their engines glowing white. Missiles streaked through the darkness like falling stars, and the first alien cruiser disintegrated into fire. The shockwave rippled through the defense line. Alarms screamed. The Threx fleet scrambled to respond, launching fighters in swarms, but they were too slow. Human pilots darted through them like shadows, their ships smaller but faster, cutting through alien formations with deadly precision. The aliens had called humans emotional, but what they faced now wasn't emotion. It was precision born of pain. Inside one of the alien command stations, officers shouted in panic. "They're targeting our reactors. How do they know our locations?" Another screamed. They didn't know that the humans had spent years studying Threx patterns, learning their weaknesses. They didn't know that Earth's intelligence had been quietly preparing for this day since the first treaty was signed. Human ships didn't waste fire. They struck every key target, dismantling communication arrays, fuel depots, and power cores. Within hours, the first planet's defense grid collapsed, leaving its skies burning. But the humans didn't land. They didn't take prisoners. They just moved on, leaving behind silence and wreckage. Back on Erebus 1, Rains watched the battle unfold on the holo-display. His officers reported in rapid tones, Sector 4 secured. Enemy fleet retreating. Minimal casualties. Rains nodded, expression unreadable. "Mark the next target," he said. "We're not done." As the ships turned, the stars outside seemed to shift, as if the galaxy itself was watching. The Threx High Council, sitting far away on their shining capital world, received the first reports of the destruction. Their leader slammed his claws against the table. "They dare bring war to us," he hissed. Another counselor replied, trembling, "They destroyed the border systems in hours. Their weapons, no known match." The leader growled, "Then we'll send everything we have. Crush them before they reach our core worlds." They didn't understand that nothing could stop what was coming. Meanwhile, the human fleet advanced deeper, its presence like a storm moving across the stars. Every colony, every outpost that had cheered when Alaris 9 fell now faced the wrath of humanity. One alien officer, in a desperate broadcast, cried out, "They don't talk. They don't demand. They just destroy." On board human ships, the soldiers listened in silence. There was no satisfaction, only grim duty. Each planet burned, each fleet fell, and still they pressed on. In the quiet between battles, a pilot whispered to his wingmate, "Do you ever think about them? The ones we're killing?" His partner replied, "I think about the children on Alaris 9. That's enough." Then they rejoined the fight. Days turned into weeks as the campaign spread across the Dominion. The Threx fought fiercely, but every victory they tried to claim was turned to dust. Human tactics were unpredictable. They fought like no other species. Every setback became a trap, every retreat a feint. The aliens began calling them the Silent Storm. But to humans, it was justice. On Earth, the news reached the people through encrypted feeds. They watched the fleet's progress with mixed emotions, pride and sorrow. Mothers prayed for their children in uniform, fathers stood silent before screens, and children pointed at the stars, asking when the soldiers would come home. Across the planet, the name Alaris 9 became more than a tragedy, it became a promise. Humanity would never again be silent in the face of cruelty. Back in Threx space, as another alien world fell, Reigns received a new signal, an open transmission from the Threx High Council. The alien leader appeared on the main screen, his tone dripping with arrogance even as fire burned behind him. "Human," he spat, "you think you can erase us? You are insects. You act from emotion, and emotion makes you weak." Reigns stood still, his hands clasped behind his back. "Emotion didn't burn your ships," he said coldly. "Discipline did." The alien snarled, "Then come, human. Come and see what awaits you at our homeworld." The transmission ended. Reigns turned to his officers. "He just invited us to his funeral," he said. "Set course." As the fleet turned toward the Threx home system, tension filled every deck. Engineers checked weapons, medics prepared for casualties, and pilots rested in silence, knowing the next battle could be their last. In the observation bay, one soldier gazed at the stars and whispered, "My sister died on Alaris 9. I'm ready." His voice was calm, not angry, just resolved. That was the heart of humanity now, not wild rage, but quiet determination. Hours later, the fleet reached the outskirts of the Threx home system. The alien capital world glowed bright against the star, surrounded by defense platforms and thousands of warships. It was a fortress built to last forever. But as the humans emerged from hyperspace, the aliens realized forever had just ended. The human flagship transmitted one final message before the battle began. A single sentence. "Transmission from Earth. Message received." Then the stars erupted in light. Thousands of beams cut through the void, tearing apart alien formations. The war for vengeance had reached its final stage, and in that instant, the galaxy realized the truth. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. Humanity was rewriting the laws of fear. The war for vengeance had reached its most brutal stage. The human fleet now stood at the edge of the Threx home system, where the enemy's defenses were thick enough to blot out the stars. Every radar pulse, every scan returned the same sight. Thousands of alien warships, planetary shields glowing bright, and weapons primed to fire. On the bridge of Erebus 1, The lights dimmed as Admiral Rains stood before the main screen, his reflection faint in the glass. He could see the glow of the alien sun burning ahead, and he thought of the faces of those who had died on Alaris 9. The families, the children, the soldiers who never got to fire a single shot. He turned to his crew, his voice steady but filled with weight. "This is not a battle for glory," he said quietly. "It's for silence, so their screams are never heard again." Across the fleet, soldiers prepared in silence. Inside one of the carriers, young pilots sat in a narrow briefing room, listening to the captain's final orders. The captain's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "You'll see thousands of them. Don't think, just move. Trust your instincts, trust your wingmates. Remember what they took from us." One of the pilots, a woman with short hair and a calm face, closed her eyes. Her brother had been stationed on Alaris 9. She whispered under her breath, "For you, Leo." The launch doors opened, and her fighter shot into the blackness, joining hundreds of others forming tight formations across the sky. The alien defense grid lit up like a storm, beams of green and red energy lashing out in all directions. The human fighters twisted and dove, breaking apart to avoid the fire, returning volleys with cold precision. Explosions flared across the void, lighting the sky like shattered stars. Inside the Threx command station, chaos reigned. Alarms screamed, officers shouted in their guttural language, and commanders barked orders to hold the line. "Push them back," one roared. "They're only human." But the human fleet didn't slow. Massive cruisers advanced through the bombardment, their shields glowing blue under the relentless fire. When they fired back, whole enemy lines vanished. The Threx weapons couldn't match human targeting systems. Every human shot found a weak point, every blast a critical wound. The aliens had numbers, but the humans had precision. Slowly, steadily, the wall of ships defending the Threx homeworld began to crumble. Back aboard Erebus 1, Admiral Rains watched the tactical feed. "Sector 6 collapsing," his officer reported. "Enemy fleet retreating to planetary orbit." Rains nodded. "Follow them. Don't give them space to breathe." Then his eyes shifted to the screen showing the planet itself, a massive green world ringed by defense satellites and orbiting factories. "How many civilians?" he asked quietly. The analyst hesitated. "Billions, sir." Rains stood silent for a moment. He wasn't blind to what vengeance cost. "Then we aim for the fleet and the power grid only," he ordered. "We're not executioners." Down in the lower decks, soldiers and engineers worked in the heat and hum of machinery. Reactor cores burned bright, and the air smelled of ozone and sweat. Some of the crew began to argue. "Why hold back?" one man said bitterly. "They didn't care when they burned our families." Another answered, "If we destroy them all, we become them." The argument ended when an older mechanic spoke softly. "We fight for justice, not hate. If hate wins, then Alaris 9 truly dies again." The room went quiet. But the aliens didn't stop. Desperation turned them cruel. On the planet below, the Threx High Command ordered every weapon they had to fire at the human fleet, even if it meant destroying their own orbital defenses. Giant cannons launched beams so powerful that human ships cracked under the pressure. One blast tore through the destroyer Artemis, ripping it apart. In the command room of Erebus 1, the impact reports flashed red. "We lost the Artemis," someone said. Rains clenched his fist but didn't look away. "They'll pay for it," he muttered. Meanwhile, in the debris field near the planet's orbit, a human rescue craft flew dangerously close to the fighting, searching for survivors. Inside it, medics worked frantically as damaged fighters docked one after another. "We've got wounded," someone shouted. The medics pulled out pilots burned and bleeding, trying to keep them alive. One of them, the young woman from earlier, was dragged out unconscious, clutching a small photo of her brother. The medic looked at it briefly before whispering, "You'll see him soon. Just hold on." In the Threx capital city, panic spread. Civilians flooded shelters while government officials screamed at each other. Some demanded surrender. Others wanted to fight to the last breath. The Threx leader slammed his claws down on the table. "We will not kneel to these creatures," he roared. "They bleed like we do." But outside, the sky itself was bleeding. Fire rained down as human ships shattered their orbital stations. The Threx Council's palace shook, walls cracking from distant impacts. And for the first time in centuries, the rulers of the Dominion felt fear. On the Erebus 1, a communications officer spoke, "Incoming transmission, open channel from the Threx leader." The alien appeared on the screen, his once regal armor scorched and his eyes full of rage. "Human," he spat. "You think this makes you strong? You think this vengeance gives you honor? You destroy everything you touch." Admiral Rains stared at him in silence for a moment, then said quietly, "We didn't start this. You did. You called our peace weakness. You burned a world of children. And now you see what your arrogance created." The alien hissed, "If you kill us, you will be monsters too." Rains looked him straight in the eye. "Then let history call us monsters, but let it never call us victims." The transmission cut out, leaving only static. As the final enemy fleet broke apart, the human ships moved into formation around the planet. The order came from Rains himself, "Power up the Dawnfire array." Deep within Erebus 1, a blinding white light began to pulse. The crew shielded their eyes as energy flowed through massive conduits into the weapon's core. It was the weapon humanity swore never to use, a sun-piercing cannon that could burn an entire atmosphere. The engineers looked to Rains for confirmation. He gave a slow nod. "Target their central command. One shot." Outside, the silence before the end was unbearable. On both sides, survivors watched the growing light from the human flagship. It was beautiful and terrible all at once. Then, in a flash brighter than any sunrise, the beam struck. The Threx capital vanished in an instant. The beam tore through the surface, splitting mountains, boiling oceans, and turning cities to glass. The planet's crust cracked open, glowing like molten metal. When the light faded, half the world was gone, the rest burning. The surviving alien ships fled in chaos, broadcasting distress calls that no one answered. Inside the human fleet, no one cheered. The bridge of Erebus 1 was silent. Rains stood alone, watching the planet die on the screen. "Cease fire," he ordered finally. His voice was quiet, heavy with sorrow. Around him, the officers obeyed, their faces pale. They had won, but victory felt hollow. One young officer whispered, "We just destroyed a world." Another replied, "They destroyed one first." Rains turned away from the burning planet and looked toward the distant stars. "Signal all ships," he said softly. "Mission complete. Prepare to return home." As the fleet began to withdraw, the once bright star of the Threx home system dimmed under the smoke and dust. The humans left behind nothing but silence and a graveyard of broken ships. For the galaxy, the message was clear: humanity might forgive, but it would never forget. The fleet drifted through the wreckage of the Threx homeworld's orbit, silent and cold. What had once been a shining capital of an empire was now a broken planet, half of its surface molten, half lost to black dust. The burning light reflected on the hulls of the human ships, turning them red and gold like ghosts sailing through fire. Inside the command deck of Erebus 1, Admiral Rains stood motionless before the panoramic window, staring at what they had done. The Dawnfire array had ended the war in a single, blinding moment, but the aftertaste of victory felt bitter. The bridge was quiet. No one celebrated, no one spoke. Only the low hum of the ship's engines filled the air. "Status report," Rains said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "All enemy transmissions ceased," an officer replied. "No signs of resistance remaining." Another officer looked up from her console. "Sir, the planet's core is collapsing. It's dying." Rains nodded slowly. "So it's done." He didn't sound proud. Across the fleet, soldiers and pilots sat in silence. The adrenaline of battle had faded, leaving behind exhaustion and grief. Many of them had lost friends during the assault, and now, watching the enemy world burn, they didn't know whether to feel relief or sorrow. In the medical bay, nurses moved quietly between rows of wounded. One young pilot, his arm bandaged and his face pale, whispered to the medic, "Did we win?" The medic paused before answering softly, "We survived." The words hung heavy in the air. For many, that was enough. For others, it was a question that would haunt them forever. On one of the smaller ships, Lieutenant Mara sat alone in the observation chamber, staring at the distant ruins through the viewport. Her reflection trembled in the glass as tears slid down her face. She had dreamed of avenging Alaris, 9 since the day it burned. But now that the vengeance was complete, she felt no peace, only emptiness. The faces of the dead still filled her mind. "We erased them," she whispered to herself. "All of them." Her commanding officer entered quietly behind her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "They chose this," he said. "They brought this war." Mara shook her head slowly. "Maybe, but we finished it." The officer didn't answer. He simply looked out the window with her, the glow of the dying planet reflecting in both their eyes. On Erebus 1, the crew worked to assess the damage from the battle. Dozens of ships were lost, thousands of soldiers dead. The price of vengeance was high, and the admiral knew it. As he stood in his quarters, looking over casualty reports, he felt the weight of every name listed. Each one represented a life given for a cause that now seemed both just and unbearable. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph, a colony family standing before their home, smiling. The words written on the back read, "Alaris 9, Peace Day, Year 2139. It was taken just months before the attack." He closed his eyes and whispered, "We did what had to be done." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure if he believed it. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, news of the destruction spread like wildfire. The Galactic Council held an emergency meeting in its crystal chamber. Delegates from hundreds of species gathered in disbelief. The Threx seat was empty, its symbol dark. Murmurs filled the air. "They destroyed an entire world," one alien hissed. "They used a forbidden weapon." Another replied fearfully, "They warned us what would happen if provoked. We didn't listen." The council's leader, a tall, silver-skinned being, slammed his hand on the table. "This cannot stand. No species has the right to erase another." But the others hesitated. No one dared to confront humanity now. Their fleets were unmatched, their technology advanced, and their will, terrifyingly strong. Some whispered that humans had become monsters. Others whispered that they had become gods. Back on Earth, people watched the first images transmitted from the fleet. The news anchor's voice trembled as she read the report. "The Threx Dominion has fallen. Their capital destroyed. Humanity has avenged Alaris 9. Across cities, people cheered and wept. Streets filled with lights, parades began, and banners of Alaris 9 flew beside the Earth flag. For a brief moment, unity returned. Yet, among the joy, there was unease. Some celebrated victory, others feared what it meant. A few quiet voices asked, "What happens now that we've erased an entire world?" But those questions were drowned beneath the sound of triumph. Days later, the fleet began its return journey. The stars stretched long and thin as the ships entered hyperspace, leaving behind the ashes of the Threx system. Inside the flagship, the crew moved like ghosts, tired but disciplined. Rains stood before the navigation window, watching the stars flicker past. His second-in-command, Commander Harlow, approached quietly. "The Council is calling for a hearing, sir. They want explanations." Rains didn't look at him. "Let them talk. Words are cheap." Harlow hesitated, then asked, "Do you regret it?" The Admiral turned slowly, his eyes hard but weary. "Regret keeps you human. But weakness kills more worlds than any weapon." The journey home was long and quiet. Many soldiers dreamed restless dreams of fire and screaming skies. Some saw the faces of the Threx. Others heard the last cries of Alaris 9. The line between justice and vengeance blurred in their hearts. By the time they reached Earth's orbit, the blue planet shone like a jewel against the void, a reminder of what they fought for. As the ships descended, crowds gathered worldwide to welcome them. But when the soldiers stepped out, they didn't raise their hands or smile. They looked at the sky, then at the faces of their people, and walked silently past the celebrations. They had seen too much. Later that night, Admiral Rains stood alone on a balcony overlooking the sea. The waves were calm, the stars faint in the distance. He thought of the Threx world, now nothing but dust. He thought of Alaris 9, its laughter, its light. The breeze carried the sound of the ocean, soft and steady. A voice behind him broke the silence. It was Mara. "Sir, the Council wants to label what we did as a necessary action." Rains didn't turn. "They can call it what they want," he said quietly. "But history won't call it mercy." She stepped beside him, her eyes on the horizon. "Do you think we'll ever stop fighting?" Rains shook his head. "Not while someone out there thinks peace is weakness." As dawn rose, a faint light spread across the sea, reflecting off the metal memorial being built on the shore, a monument for Alaris 9. Its inscription read, "In memory of those who burned, and the ones who avenged them." Rains stared at it, then whispered, "We made the stars tremble. But maybe, we trembled too." The sound of the waves swallowed his words as the screen of the story faded to black, leaving only the echo of fire, loss, and a question that would haunt humanity for generations. When does vengeance become too much? The galaxy was no longer the same. The Threx Dominion, once one of the oldest and most feared empires, was gone, its systems reduced to silent ashes. The news rippled outward like shockwaves through the void, spreading fear and awe to every corner of the stars. On distant worlds, alien leaders watched the human broadcasts with disbelief. Humanity had done what no other race ever dared. They had erased a star system. They didn't just win a war. They reshaped the meaning of power. In the weeks that followed, whispers grew among the great empires. The humans erased a sun. The phrase became a warning passed in fear, a reminder that the quiet species from a blue planet could unleash storms that ended civilizations. Inside the Galactic Council Hall, tension crackled like static. Thousands of delegates filled the vast crystal chamber, each representing their world. Holograms shimmered above their seats, showing the red void where the Threx system used to be. The council leader, a tall, luminous being with silver skin, spoke with unease. "The humans have crossed a line no species was meant to cross. The Dawnfire array violates every law of the council." A deep-voiced reptilian delegate hissed in return. "And who will punish them? You? Me? Their fleet could wipe this chamber from existence before we blink." The hall erupted in arguments, some demanding justice, others pleading for caution. Fear outweighed outrage. The humans were not there to defend themselves. They didn't need to be. Their silence was louder than any speech. Back on Earth, life tried to return to normal, but nothing truly felt the same. For the first time in centuries, the world was united under one banner, the Terran Confederation. The people had seen what humanity could do when it stood together. Factories that once built weapons were now constructing defense networks. The military became the largest in history. Every nation contributed soldiers, ships, and scientists, all bound by the same vow. Never again will Earth be vulnerable. Streets filled with parades celebrating the heroes of Alaris 9's vengeance, though many of those heroes didn't feel like celebrating. Veterans walked silently, haunted by what they had witnessed. Children waved flags and threw flowers, but the soldiers' eyes stayed hollow, staring far beyond the horizon as if seeing the fire still burning in the distance. In the capital city of the Confederation, a massive memorial was unveiled. It stood taller than any monument before it, a tower of black glass that reflected both sky and sea. At its base were the engraved names of every soul lost on Alaris 9, and above them a single phrase, "They tried to erase us. We erased their fear." Millions gathered to watch as Admiral Rains placed a folded flag at the monument's base. Cameras from every colony transmitted the image live, capturing his face as he saluted, his expression unreadable. The crowd cheered, but Rains didn't smile. He turned away quietly and walked down the long steps as the cheers faded behind him. Later that night, he sat alone in his quarters overlooking the city. Outside his window, the skyline glowed with lights, bright, alive, full of the energy of a planet reborn. But he couldn't shake the image of the Threk's homeworld breaking apart, the fire swallowing its oceans, its sky collapsing into ash. He poured himself a drink, the glass trembling slightly in his hand. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Incoming transmission, the computer announced. It was from the Galactic Council. Rains hesitated, then accepted. The hologram of the council leader appeared before him, the alien's face filled with tension. "Admiral," the being said carefully, "the council demands an explanation for your actions." Rains looked at him with cold, tired eyes. "You want an explanation?" he said quietly. "Look at the stars where their system used to be. That's the explanation." The alien frowned. "You have set a dangerous example. Others may follow your path." Rains leaned forward. "Then they should think twice before lighting a match near humanity again." The connection cut off before the council could respond. Across the colonies, smaller nations and independent systems sent envoys to Earth, offering treaties, trade, and protection pacts. Everyone wanted to stand beside the humans now, not against them. But with every alliance came a hidden fear. Humanity had proven it could protect its own, but it had also proven it could destroy anything that threatened it. In the shadows of these new alliances, rumors began to spread, rumors of secret human projects, of new weapons being built, of technologies capable of bending light and time. The galaxy watched nervously as Earth grew stronger every day. Among ordinary humans, emotions were divided. Some saw Earth's rise as justice, others as a dangerous path. In quiet bars and crowded halls, people argued. "They killed our people. We had every right," one man said. Another replied, "We destroyed billions. How are we different now?" A woman sitting nearby whispered, "We're different because we remember why we did it." Her words silenced the room. Humanity had changed, yes, but they still carried guilt. That guilt became part of who they were. In orbit above Earth, Erebus 1 floated silently, now a symbol of both triumph and tragedy. Its black hull reflected the sunlight like a mirror, and its weapon systems, now dormant, were seen as a reminder to every human and alien alike. Admiral Rains visited the ship one last time. The corridors were empty, the engines quiet. He walked through them slowly, his boots echoing softly on the metal floors. Every step reminded him of the voices that once filled these halls. The laughter, the orders, the battle cries. He stopped before the viewport and looked at the stars. "We've done what no one thought possible," he said softly. "But victory doesn't erase ghosts." His second-in-command, Commander Harlow, joined him. "Sir, the Council won't forgive this." Rains didn't take his eyes off the stars. "They don't have to. We didn't do it for them." Weeks later, strange signals began to appear on deep space sensors. Some said it was debris. Others said it was the beginning of something new. In distant galaxies, species that had once mocked humanity now began building larger fleets, preparing in secret. They didn't want to provoke humans, but they feared them. The balance of power had shifted forever. Humanity had gone from one of many to one above all. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humans were not conquerors, but survivors. Push them too far, and they would burn the sky itself to make sure no one ever tried again. As night fell on Earth, Admiral Rains stood once more at the ocean memorial. The wind was cold, the waves whispering softly against the shore. He placed his hand against the engraved names and whispered, "We avenged you. But we also lost a part of ourselves." He looked up at the stars, the same stars that once looked peaceful, now filled with fear. "They'll remember us," he said, "but not for our kindness." He turned to leave, the moonlight reflecting off his uniform. Behind him, the monument stood silently, its dark surface reflecting both the light of the heavens and the shadow of humanity's new legend. In that reflection, the galaxy saw its future, a universe that would never again take Earth's silence for weakness. Years passed, but the memory of the war refused to fade. The galaxy that once laughed at humanity now whispered its name in fear. Where the Threk's dominion had once ruled, there was only emptiness, a scar across the stars, a wound that never healed. Trade ships avoided the region entirely, calling it the Silent Zone. Even the bravest captains refused to pass near it, claiming that the ghosts of the burned world whispered through their comms at night. But for humans, the silence was the price of peace. The fleets that once raged across the void now floated in orbit above Earth, quiet and watchful guardians. The world below flourished again, but beneath the surface, the shadow of what had been done lingered like an old wound no one could ignore. Admiral Rains, now older, carried that shadow more than anyone. He lived alone in a small house by the sea, far from the city, where he could hear the waves instead of the noise of celebration. Every morning, he walked along the shore and watched the sunrise paint the sky in red and gold. That color used to remind him of victory, but now it reminded him of fire, the fire that had consumed a world. He had become a hero to humanity, a symbol of strength and vengeance, but inside, he felt hollow. Every medal, every speech, every monument felt like a weight pulling him deeper into regret. He had done what no other commander could, and yet, every night when he closed his eyes, he heard the voices again. The desperate cry from Alaris 9, and the silence that followed when he gave the order to erase the Threx star. One evening, as the wind howled outside his home, a soft chime broke the silence. A visitor. When he opened the door, a young officer stood there, saluting sharply. "Sir, permission to speak," she said. Rains nodded and invited her in. She introduced herself as Captain Mara, one of the pilots who had survived the battle years ago. Her eyes carried the same weight his did. "I came to ask something," she said quietly. "Did we do the right thing?" The Admiral looked at her for a long time before replying. "We did what had to be done," he said, his voice heavy. "But right and wrong died with the first blast on Alaris 9. She stared at him, struggling to find words. "They call us saviors," she whispered. "But I keep dreaming of the ones we burned. I see their cities falling apart, and I wonder if they were so different from us." Rains sighed deeply. "They were," he said. "They thought mercy was weakness. They learned otherwise. But learning cost us our soul." Later that night, long after she left, Rains sat by his window watching the stars. A storm rolled in over the horizon, and thunder echoed like distant cannons. He poured himself a drink, his hand trembling slightly. On his desk sat a small data chip labeled Alaris 9 Archive. It contained the last transmissions from the colony, the final moments before its destruction. He had kept it hidden all these years, unable to watch it again, unable to delete it. But that night, he finally pressed play. The screen flickered to life. Static. Then a faint image, a family in a living room on Alaris 9, smiling as they sang a birthday song. Children laughing, a candle blowing out, then a flash of red light as the attack began. The screen went black. Rains stared at it for a long time, his eyes glassy, then whispered, "We didn't save them. We only avenged them."